For many of you watching the Royal Commission on Anti-Semitism hearings this week. And it's quite disturbing hearing some of the testimony of parents and children going to different schools and the anti-Semitism they're facing regularly and the lack of action by authorities. And it could be quite disheartening. But I think the Royal Commission in itself is quite a positive thing. I was meeting a couple months ago with Senator Tim Kaine from the United States. He came for a visit and met with a few rabbis. And he says, we're going to be watching the Royal Commission. We're going to see how it's conducted and what it's about. Because maybe it could inform us about the anti-Semitism within our society. And I think that's a very positive thing. I think good things will come from it. So even though there's such negativity involved in hearing the horrific and really soul-destroying, painful stories, I do think this is going to be transformational. Because we always have to see that with everything, even the negative, God always has a plan. It's always going to come to a positive state. You know, this week's Torah portion we read, the Pasha B'Chokaisai, the curses that God gives the Jewish people if they don't listen to the Torah and mitzvahs. And they're quite heavy. They're quite disturbing. We read it quickly in shul and on a low tone because, as I said, it could be it's graphic. It's quite graphic. But at the end of it all, you see a negativity that comes to a positivity. For example, one of the things it says is that you'll be kicked out of the land, and I will make it desolate, and it will be desolate for your enemies. In other words, no one will ever be able to establish an independent state, an independent existence in Israel. If you're not there, the land doesn't accept anybody else. As Mark Twain famously said in his visit in the late 1800s, that he's gone through the length and breadth of the land and it was desolate. There were no people there practically. And it's only when the Jewish people established themselves and established the land that it started to bloom, and others came in at the same time. In addition, the Teichacha does say at the end, I will remember the covenant with Jacob, with Isaac, with your forefathers, with Abraham. And then it says, I'll remember the covenant with the Rishonim, the first ones. In other words, the tribes, as Rashi says. The tribes that left Egypt. And God made a covenant with them that they're going to go into Israel. And a covenant that he will never forsake the Jewish people. And indeed, we see that. And throughout history, there's never been a nation that has come back to their homeland after being exiled for 2,000 years as the Jewish people have. That is the fulfillment of God's promise and covenant, which is mentioned in the Torah many, many, many times. That at the end of the day, God remembers us. And I was learning a piece of Talmud this week, where the Talmud tells us there was a king called Chizkiyahu, very, very righteous king. And the prophet says that Chizkiyahu did what was good and righteous and liked in the eyes of God. And then it says something very strange. After these things, Sancherib, the king of Ashur, came and laid siege on Judea. And the Talmud asks, is that the reward? We're talking here about how positive and how good Chizkiyahu was as a king, a positive king. It wasn't always the case. More often than not, it wasn't the case. And then you tell us that for this, Sancherib, the king of Assyria, came to try to ransack and to kill and to destroy Jerusalem and to bring fear into the hearts of all the people living in Jerusalem, to the extent that most of the people living there, including men of the Sanhedrin, wanted to give up and just wave the white flag to Sancherib. And he says, I'm going to bring you to a land that's going to be just like your land. There was no question that he was going to exile them. It's just that it won't be as bad. It won't be such a bad land. It'll be just as good. He didn't say better because he knew they wouldn't believe him, because there is no better than Jerusalem. So the Talmud asks, is this the reward for Sancherib? And the Talmud responds and says, if this reward for Chizkiyahu, so if God would have said to Chizkiyahu the king, you know what, I want you to gain from this experience. I want you to win out of this experience. I want you to get all of the treasures that Sancherib is going to bring. Because he brought 185,000 soldiers with much treasure outside of Jerusalem. I want you to get all that. And for that, Sancherib will have to come and start the idea that he's going to wage war. So Chizkiyahu would have said, thank God, I don't need him, his treasures, and I don't need the fear that he's going to bring onto my people. So God, however, wanted them to get it. So he brought Sancherib. Sancherib came with 185,000 soldiers on little Jerusalem. And Chizkiyahu went to sleep at night, having full faith in Hashem. And that night, like 100,000 of his soldiers died in a plague, and the rest ran away and left all their gold and silver and bounty that they had with them. They left it all there, right outside Jerusalem. And then the men of Jerusalem came out and collected all that, these possessions. And that's what Hashem wanted for Chizkiyahu to get. So sometimes we go through a difficult time, and if we were asked, you want to go through a difficult time, but you're going to get this at the other end, we'd say absolutely not. But God has his plan, and he wants us to have it. It came to my mind when I read the other day that Israel is sending Germany fuel for their planes, because they can't get the fuel because of the Strait of Hormuz. So Israel is the one selling Germany the fuel and gas. Like, who would have believed that could happen? And the defense industry of Israel has gone through the roof, making the entire economy buoyant, one of the best economies in the world. The stock market is the best in the world. The shekel is strong. All this happened not despite, but maybe because of what went on. So we always have to look in our life that sometimes Hashem gives us something harsh and difficult, but it's always to give us the treasure on the other side. We have to think in those terms. We can't see these positive things that could be dangerous, maybe like AI, in a negative way. There's no way. This is going to be a massive, positive, ultimate event. And humanity will circumvent the negativity. There's no question that Hashem wants to give us goodness, and the harshness that we see is only a way of getting there. Good Shabbos.